What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Malari. So in this episode, it's going to be a preview of the MLB season. Today is opening day. Happy opening day to everybody out there. It's a baseball fan. The best day of the year, in my opinion. I love opening day so much. Every single year, it's something I look forward to. Every single year, every single team has a new and clean slate, a fresh start to the year, leaving every team and fan with optimism and a lot of positivity around their upcoming season. So hopefully everyone does enjoy opening day. As I said, it's my favorite day in sports every single year. So I'm going to preview the season. I'm going to break down each and every team. I'll go division by division, give you my record predictions, what I think each team is going to have for a win-loss record. And then after that, I'll get into my playoff predictions. And then at the end, my award predictions. I'm going to go probably kind of quick with this since I don't want to make this too long of an episode. So we'll start out with the AL East. I have the Orioles in first place with the record of 162, 100 wins, 62 losses. Such a young and dangerous lineup with talents like Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson. It's crazy how good this team could be for years to come. They're basically going to be the new Houston Astros, in my opinion. They're going to be good for the next decade after developing talent through the draft very well and obviously developing guys through the minor leagues. They draft very well and they also develop the guys all the way up through their farm system. Wait for Jackson Holliday to make it up. He's going to be up at some point. He's right now the number one prospect in baseball. And then you also add in, they've had the number one overall prospect 3 years in a row. So they do develop talent very well. Some things with their major league club. I expect Cedric Mullins to have a bounce-back season. He did hit 233 last season. Wasn't really great. I expect him to hit 275 this season with 20 home runs. Issue for him last year was that he missed around 40 games, so hopefully he can stay healthy this season. Grayson Rodriguez, I think, will be a Cy Young candidate in their rotation. If you look at his numbers, 7-4 last year, 4.35 ERA in 23 starts. He's only 24 years old, so there's a lot of room to grow. The issue for him last season, he did have some trouble with walks. So that's something that has to get better. He had a 1.336 whip last season, but he does have great stuff. He's a guy to keep your eye on. Adding Corbin Burnes in the offseason was the perfect move for this team. They really needed an ace, and they went out and got one. I think that's going to take them over the top. And then they have some other good pitching options as well. Dean Kramer, Cole Irvin, both those guys were good last year for them. And then you add in 2 guys that will start the year on the IL, Kyle Bradish and John Means. But when those 2 guys get back, their rotation is going to be even stronger. I expect this team to make a big run in the AL this year. I expect them to make the World Series. That's my prediction right now on opening day. I expect the Orioles to be in the World Series this year. That's my prediction. Could be a hot take to some people, considering a lot of people like the Astros and the Yankees. But I think the Orioles have what it takes. I really do. I think the Orioles can make it out of the AL. And like I said, I think this team can be dominant for years to come. Obviously, Jackson Holliday hasn't made it up yet. He's a highly touted prospect. They have another former first-round pick in Heston Kjerstad. I know he played some major league games last year, didn't really develop yet, but I think he's going to be better this season in the at-bats he gets. This team does have a bright future, and I'm just waiting for this team to spend money because now they do have new ownership. And usually when there's a change in owner, the new owner comes in and they're really aggressive in free agency. So I'm hoping next year the Orioles do spend a lot of money, and they do have the prospects to go out and get anybody they want. That's why they went out and got a guy like Corbin Burnes and added him to their rotation. I am very high on the Orioles this season. I have them at 162. Next up, in second place in the AL East, I have the Boston Red Sox. And I know people are probably going to be wondering, how do you have the Red Sox in second place in the AL East? What's the story with the Red Sox right now? How do you have them at second place? Well, here's the thing. I have them going 84-78. I think this division, besides the Orioles, I think they're going to be ahead of the rest of the teams in the AL East. I think the rest of the division, though, is going to be separated by a few games. So I have the Red Sox at 84-78. I am higher on them than most people are, maybe because I'm a Red Sox fan, maybe because I'm a little biased, but I am going to be honest about that. I am more high on this Red Sox team than most people are, and I'm going to tell you why, though. I know the biggest question mark with this team is starting pitching, but I think they're going to have some guys that emerge in this rotation and take a big step up this year. I think Cutter Crawford will be an all-star candidate this year. Last year, 6-8 record, 4.04 ERA, a 1.13 ERA plus with a 1.06 whip and 9.4 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched. I think he takes a big step up this season. And I think he ends up having a better season than Brian Bayo. That's a hot take, but I think Cutter Crawford could be a 12-7 record with a 3.2 ERA this season. That would be crazy, probably to most people, but I do think Cutter Crawford has the stuff to get those numbers. It's just a question of consistency, and can he go long enough in a game to go 12-7 and get a win in each of those starts? Wins have been a problem for this Red Sox team. They really haven't had too many starting pitchers that can go more than 5 innings to qualify for a win. That's going to be a problem for a good amount of these starting pitchers, but if they can find a way to get the most out of guys like Cutter Crawford and Tanner Houck, this Red Sox team can be dangerous in the AL. Tanner Houck, another guy that I'm very high on, I just think he needs to be more consistent. He has great stuff. If he can become the guy that I think he can be, I think he could have a double-digit win season with a 3.8 ERA. Probably high aspirations. I'm probably going to be wrong about a lot of these predictions, not just with the Red Sox, but with everyone. But at the end of the day, that's the beauty of sports. That's the beauty of a sports podcast. You're going to throw your predictions out there, and a lot of the time you're going to have hot takes. Not everyone's going to agree. But that's the beauty of sports. That's the beauty of sports radio and sports podcasting. You're able to get your opinions out there, and at the end of the day, nobody knows how a season or a game is going to go until it's played. So I'm very high on Cutter Crawford. I am high on Tanner Houck as well. Another guy that I like a lot, Tristan Casas, really growing into his all-star potential. Last year, he had 24 home runs, a 263 batting average, and 856 OPS, with a 367 on-base percentage, which was 9th in the AL last year. After the All-Star break last season, he really heated up, a 317 batting average, a 1034 OPS, 15 home runs, 38 RBIs in the last 54 games of the season. Very impressive stretcher. The Red Sox are going to need a lot of offense out of him this season. If they're going to be a playoff team like I'm expecting and like I'm predicting, they need to be better defensively. 102 errors last season, second most in the major leagues. They need to be better on defense. Having Trevor Story back, hopefully for a full season, will definitely help them bounce back on defense. They need a Trevor Story bounce back season at the plate as well. I think Trevor Story is capable of a 20 home run, 280 batting average, and an 850 OPS season. That might be a lot, but the Red Sox need Trevor Story to be closer to the Story on the Rockies than he's been with the Red Sox the last few seasons. He's really struggled with injuries. If he can stay healthy, though, and stay consistent, that would be huge for the Red Sox lineup. I know I'm very optimistic about this team. That probably could go downhill pretty quick if things don't go right out of the gate, but I am going to be more optimistic with this team than most people. I do think they have the hitting. With guys like Rafael Devers, Tristan Casas, Jarren Duran, Masataka Yoshida, I think they're going to be able to score runs. It's just all about run prevention. Being able to prevent runs and have better pitching, that's going to be the biggest question mark for the Red Sox this season. Trevor Story is another question mark. He looked very good in spring training. The Red Sox need him to keep that momentum in the regular season. In third place in the AL, I have the New York Yankees at 83-79. The Juan Soto acquisition is definitely huge for the Yankees lineup, especially with the short right field fence at Yankee Stadium. I do expect big numbers and Juan Soto to be an MVP candidate. I think he's going to be right there in the MVP race. But Soto does not solve all of the Yankees' issues. And neither did a healthy Aaron Judge last season. When Aaron Judge came back from his injury later in last season, after getting hurt in June, he came back midway through the end of the season. And he didn't solve the issues that the Yankees thought he would. When Judge went back in the lineup, a lot of people expected that lineup to just figure things out. But at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of guys in this Yankees lineup that are regressing. DJ LeMahieu, Anthony Rizzo, Giancarlo Stanton. All of those guys are regressing, in my opinion. And even though a healthy Aaron Judge definitely helps the lineup, and the same goes for Juan Soto, those two guys can't bring LeMahieu, Rizzo, and Stanton back a few years. They can't turn back time for those guys. Can they make the lineup easier on them? I'm sure. But Stanton hit just 211 and 191 for batting average the last two seasons. Rizzo hit just 12 home runs last season with a 244 batting average in 99 games. And honestly, he started the year hot and then went downhill. Rizzo really struggled in the last half of those games he played last season. DJ LeMahieu, he hit just 243 last season with a 718 OPS. He's been under 270 for batting average 3 years in a row with a steady decline over the last 3 seasons. That's a worry for me in the Yankees lineup. And then you add in Garrett Cole's injury, with potentially Cole missing at least a few months, which is best case scenario for the Yankees. They're going to have to rely on bounce back years from guys like Carlos Rodon and Nestor Cortez. I think Cortez is a little overrated. He had a 4.97 ERA last season. I think he's regressing. Even though it's only one bad year after 2 really good years, it's only one bad year last season. I don't really expect him to get back to those exact numbers he had 2 years ago. I do like the Marcus Stroman addition. I do like Alex Verdugo as well. I think Stroman's a solid addition to their rotation. With Cole being out, I think Stroman probably ends up being the best starter out of those guys that I mentioned between Cortez, Rodon, and Stroman. But I don't think having Stroman and Soto solves all of their problems. We'll see what the Yankees do, but I expect them to be an 83-79 team, which would be a very underwhelming season considering where a lot of people have them in their win-loss record predictions online. Next up, in 4th place in the AL East, I have the Toronto Blue Jays. I have them going 81-81. Every single year, people pick this team to win it all, or at least win the American League, and they never do it. They find ways to lose in the playoffs every single year. I do think this team is regressing. Last season, I think they regressed. I expect them to take another step back this season. Do I think they'll be better than the Rays? Probably. I think they're going to be right on par with the Red Sox and the Yankees. I think this AL East, besides the Orioles, I think those 4 teams are all going to be very close. But I do think the Blue Jays are taking a step back this season. George Springer's OPS has steadily declined each of the last 3 years. And I'm not trying to make this episode all about numbers at the end of the day. A player can have a bad last few seasons and then bounce back like we saw with Cody Bellinger last season. But George Springer's OPS has declined each and every single year the last 3 seasons. He had a 907 OPS 3 years ago, an 814 OPS 2 years ago, and a 732 OPS last season. I expect him to continue to decline, maybe have an OPS somewhere in the 700s again. Bo Bichette is a beast. I think he's going to be right at the top of the batting average leaders in the American League. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is definitely worried to me. He's regressed the last 2 seasons. In 2021, he was nearly the MVP in the AL. He had 48 home runs, a 311 batting average, a 1002 OPS. The last 2 seasons, though, all of those numbers dropped. Home runs, batting average, OPS, down to 264 for batting average last season with 26 home runs and a 788 OPS. Still a good player, still a good season, but it's not up to that potential he had 2 years ago, and I don't think he's going to carry that lineup. Justin Turner is definitely a solid addition to that lineup. I do think he's getting older, but still a very good player, very productive for the Red Sox last season. Would have loved to see him back in Boston, but at the end of the day, he got his money from Toronto. A lot is riding on Jose Barrios to continue that momentum he had last season, a 3.65 ERA in the 2023 season. That was a big bounce back year from him, but I don't really know if he's going to have those exact numbers this season. I hope that's the case. He did have a bad year in 2022, but 2023, a very good year. Before that, he was one of the best pitchers in the American League, just really didn't have much going his way in 2022. We'll see what he does in 2023. And then a dead last in the American League East, which is crazy to say because every single year this team is expected to take a step back in my eyes, and somehow they always surprise and find a way to win ball games. I think this is the year that they fall down the AL East. The Tampa Bay Rays, I have them at 80 and 82. They won't have Tyler Glasnow and Wander Franco, 2 major losses to their lineup and their pitching staff. We'll see how they replace those guys. Every single year I expect this team to take a step back, the last couple seasons at least, and every single year they always surprise and find a way to win ball games with minor league players and under-the-radar guys that no one knows. So I would not be surprised if I'm completely wrong about this and the Rays end up being first or second in the division, because that's just what they do every single year. I really like the addition of Ryan Pepiot to their rotation. I think he's going to be a stud talent for them. I think he's a guy that's going to be great right away for them in their pitching staff. Aaron Savali, former Northeastern Husky, I think he was a great pickup at the deadline last year for them. I think he has a better year than Zach Eflin this season. And then Randy Arozarena, Isaac Paredes, and obviously Yandy Diaz, 3 talented players that can hit the ball very well. But I do worry this team has lost a lot of talent to stay at the top, so I have them at 5th in the AL East. Now we'll move on to the AL Central. I have a surprise first overall team here. I have the Detroit Tigers winning the AL Central with an 85 and 77 record. It's crazy to me that I have the Tigers winning the division, especially considering how they've performed the last few years. But they have a solid rotation. Tarek Skubal, a guy that had a 2.8 ERA in 15 starts last season, with a 1.58 ERA plus. I expect him to be an all-star this season. And then they have some other good pitching options. Kenta Maeda, Jack Flaherty, 2 solid options to be the second and third guys in their rotation. And then they also have former top pick Casey Mize, who has shown flashes of greatness. He was hurt most of last season, but he has shown flashes of greatness, just needs to get more consistent, obviously, and stay healthy. But he's a guy that was a high prospect for a reason. And Spencer Torkelson had a great season last year at the plate, 31 home runs, 94 runs batted in, a big piece of their lineup. They need him to hit 250, though, not 233. I expect him, though, to have the power numbers he had last season. At second place in the AL Central, I have the Kansas City Royals being another surprise team here. I have them going 80 and 82, just a few games under 500. I really like the Seth Lugo and Michael Walker additions to the rotation. 2 guys that are going to eat innings for them. 2 guys that stayed healthy for the last few years for the most part. I'm really high on Cole Reagans this season. I think he could be an AL Cy Young candidate. And then Bobby Witt Jr., one of the best young talents in baseball. I do think the Kansas City Royals can surprise some people this season. Then the Minnesota Twins, I have at 3rd in the AL Central. I have them also going 80 and 82. An interesting team because if they stay healthy, I think they have enough to win the division. But the issue for this team has been injuries to guys like Byron Buxton, Royce Lewis. Both of those guys can be all-stars and be top players in the game of baseball if they stay healthy. But the issue is these 2 guys cannot stay on the field as of late. Byron Buxton, if healthy, I think he can be a 35 home run hitter. But it's really hard to depend on him to play more than 100 games. You can't really count on him to ever play more than 100 games, considering he's only done it once in 9 seasons in the MLB. You cannot expect him to stay fully healthy. A major question with this team is Carlos Correa. Can Carlos Correa have a bounce-back season? He only had 18 home runs last year with a 230 batting average, also with a 711 OPS. So I think he's a better player than that, but he didn't show that last season. They need a bounce-back year from him. And then you look at their rotation, Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan can definitely keep them in games, but I do expect this team to take a step back. I have them at 3rd place in the AL Central. I wish I had the Royals a game ahead of them. Having them both tied, I'm not really too big of a fan of, since I do think the Royals have what it takes to be second in the division. But at the end of the day, I have them both at 80 wins. I'll give the tiebreaker to the Royals. And then at 4th place in the AL Central, I have the Cleveland Guardians going 73 and 89. I fully expect this team to trade Shane Bieber at some point, maybe at the trade deadline. They have some talent in their rotation. Shane Bieber is obviously good. Did regress a little bit the last couple seasons, but still a good talent. And then Tristan McKenzie is a good player as well. But I think this team regresses more this season. Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, two great talents as well. But I don't expect this team to make much noise. I have them at fourth place in the AL Central. And my prediction with this team is that I think they're going to trade Shane Bieber at some point at the trade deadline. Maybe a pitching needy team. Let's say whether it's a team like the Texas Rangers. If obviously Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer don't come back healthy, maybe at the deadline they go out and add another round like Shane Bieber. But I think right now, the way I see things, I think a team that's going to go out and get Shane Bieber, I think it's going to be the Baltimore Orioles at the deadline. They have the pitching prospects to go get him. I think they add at some point to the rotation even more at some point this season. Next up, at fifth place, dead last in AL Central, I have the Chicago White Sox at 55-107. After trading Dylan Cease within the last month, and obviously Lucas Giolito, Jake Berger, Lance Lynn, and Kendall Graveman, all four of those guys getting traded last year at the deadline, it was clear that they were in a rebuild, and honestly, I think it's the best idea for them. Luis Robert, I think, is a very good player. I think he could hit 40 home runs if he were to stay healthy, but just like Byron Buxton, both those guys have battled injuries a lot. This team should be able to score some runs, but I do think pitching is going to be a major weakness for them. A guy I like, though, a rookie reliever, Jordan Leach, is a guy to keep your eye on. I think he's going to be an all-star at some point. Maybe not this season, but at some point down the line, I expect Jordan Leach to be one of the better pitchers in the American League out of the bullpen. Next up is the AL West. In first place, I have the Houston Astros at 89-73. Not too much is there to say about this team. It just seems like every single year the dynasty continues to grow. Justin Verlander will start the year on the IL with a shoulder injury, so that is a worry, but he'll be back at some point. Framber Valdez will be their opening day starter. Jose Abreu did take a step back last season with just a .237 batting average and a .680 OPS. Only 33 home runs combined over the last two seasons. He had 30 in just 2021 alone. They need a big bounce back here from him. But when you have guys like Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez and obviously Alex Bregman and Kyle Tucker, they're going to score a lot of runs. And I do really like the addition of Josh Hader to their bullpen. One of the best relievers in baseball, going to one of the best teams. Having him in the playoffs is going to be huge for that team. Next up at second in the AL West, I have the Seattle Mariners at 86-76. This team has a dangerous rotation. Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, a dominant 1-2-3 punch. And a lot of people are high on this team for a reason. Julio Rodriguez is a great talent. I do think he's a little bit overrated, at least the way things stand right now, because I think he needs to be a little bit more consistent. With that being said, he's only 23 years old, still has a lot of time to grow, and has shown flashes of greatness, obviously with his power. So he's going to continue to grow this season, I'm sure. So the Mariners, I have at second place in the division. At third, I have the Texas Rangers at 83-79. They're the reigning World Series champs, but they did lose Jordan Montgomery in the offseason. And without Max Scherzer for a while, that definitely worries me. And then obviously Jacob deGrom will be out for at least half the season as well. They're going to have to rely on Nathan Eovaldi to stay healthy. And even though he's been healthy for the last few seasons, he has had injuries in the past, which is why I'm going to worry about their pitching a little bit more than I would have had Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom been healthy. If deGrom and Scherzer were healthy, I would have had this team probably winning the division. But since they're going to be out for probably at least half the season, I have the Rangers in third place. There's still so much talent, though, in this team's lineup. That's why when you look at this team, even without the pitching obviously being elite, with a lot of guys being injured and obviously losing Jordan Montgomery, having Corey Seager in the top of your lineup with a guy like Marcus Semien and Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim, this team is a very dangerous team. Corey Seager is a top MVP candidate for a reason every single year. And then obviously Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, two rookies that are going to mash the ball right away. Carter was big in the World Series for them, so he's obviously a name that people know. But Wyatt Langford, I think, is going to catch eyes right away. He's a guy to keep your eye on in the lineup. And then obviously Adolis Garcia, Marcus Semien. This team's going to score a lot of runs. Pitching is a worry for me until Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer come back. They're going to just need those guys to the playoffs. So once those guys get back, I think this team will be ready to roll in October. In fourth place in the division, I have the Los Angeles Angels at 76-86. No Shohei Ohtani is definitely going to be a major hit for this team, especially in ticket sales. One thing that worries me most about this team is Anthony Rendon is their leadoff hitter right now, which you really can't rely on him to stay healthy or to even care about winning games. An absolutely brutal contract, maybe the worst in baseball. I do like Nolan Schanuel a lot. I like Logan Hoppe. I like Zach Neto. Three young pieces that are going to be big parts of their future. Mike Trout, I still think is a top 5 talent in the game of baseball when healthy. If he could play 125, 130 games, I think he can hit 35 home runs with ease, and I expect a major bounce back season from him. A lot is riding on Reed Detmers to be the guy in their rotation. Even though they haven't really had pitching the last few years, I know Reed Detmers is probably their best guy in the rotation. I thought they were going to go out and get Blake Snell. Obviously, that didn't end up being the case. I do like Griffin Canning a lot. I think he takes a step up this season, has a sub-4 ERA. That would be huge for the Angels rotation. And then at fifth place In the AL West, I have the Oakland Athletics at 57 and 105. A young team with limited to no expectations to compete this year. So if they win 60, 65 games, that would exceed a lot of people's expectations by far. They do have a lot of young talent. Zach Geloff, 14 home runs, 267 batting average, and 840 OPS last season in just 69 games. I expect a 25 home run season from him. And then Brent Rooker was a major surprise for them last season, hit 30 home runs, 69 runs batted in, and all-star for the AL. So that was a major surprise, obviously. But I think another surprise will be J.P. Sears, who I think is going to develop even more in their pitching rotation this season. I think he's going to have a sub-4 ERA this year, which that's high expectations. He might not be able to do it, which a lot of these predictions might go the wrong way. That's just the way predictions go at the end of the day. But I do think J.P. Sears could develop more this season and help out their pitching staff. Now I'm going to switch over to the National League. We'll start out with the NL East. I have the Braves in first at 105 and 57. No better way to put it. They're an absolute juggernaut. The definition of a juggernaut are the Atlanta Braves. Ronald Acuna Jr. had a ridiculous 40 and 70 season last year, with Matt Olson and Austin Riley having monster seasons too. That team was just unstoppable at the plate. Marcell Ozuna had a bounce-back season with 40 home runs, 100 RBIs, a career year for him. And then Michael Harris Jr., Ozzie Albies, Sean Murphy, three guys that can get on base, and they don't really get as much recognition as the rest of those guys, but they're still very good hitters and very good talents. And then you also add in Chris Sale to the rotation that already had Max Fried and Spencer Strider. Charlie Morton's there as well. That pitching staff is definitely dangerous. I think Fried ends up being the best of those guys this season. They obviously need to stay healthy, especially with Chris Sale, who's projected to be the third or fourth starter. It's just crazy how deep they are. He would have been the Red Sox first starter by far, would have been their ace. But in Atlanta, he's only the third or fourth option. But they need to stay healthy. Fried and Sale have battled injuries the last few seasons. Atlanta needs those guys to stay healthy. In second place in the NL East, I have the New York Mets at 84 and 78. Kodai Senga is going to begin the year on the IL, which is a worry for this pitching staff. So a big question for them is this. Can Luis Severino turn back time? I think Sevy can have double-digit wins this season. I'm going to say he goes 10-7 with a 3.75 ERA and a 1.45 ERA plus. He was one of the best pitchers in baseball before injuries happened. And I think having a change of scenery, even though it's just right across town, going from the Bronx now to Queens, I think he's going to have a big bounce-back season. Jose Quintana is the opening day starter for the Mets, a 3.57 ERA last season in 13 starts. He had a 2.93 ERA in 32 starts back in 2022. If he were to turn back time and go back to those numbers, that would be huge for their rotation, but I don't really see that happening. I like a lot of players in this lineup. I like Starlin Marte. I like Brandon Nimmo. Obviously, Pete Alonso has great power, and then obviously adding JD Martinez is a huge addition to the lineup to drive in runs. I expect this team to be second in the NL East and be right on the border of making the playoffs. Then I have the Philadelphia Phillies at 82 and 80. Kyle Schwarber's batting average has been off for the last few seasons, but he's been able to maintain his spot in the lineup because of his power. 46 home runs, 47 home runs each of the last two seasons, hitting just .218 and 197 over that stretch, though, with an MLB lead 200 and 215 strikeouts over the last two seasons. He has struck out 415 times over the last two seasons. I expect and I see a regression from Kyle Schwarber this season. I do not think he tops 40 home runs, and I expect his batting average to stay right around where it is, somewhere around the low 200s. And then for their pitching staff, Zach Wheeler saw his ERA jump last season from 2.82 back in 2022 to 3.61 last season. And then Aaron Nola saw his ERA jump from 3.25 to 4.46 within one season. So I see both those guys with ERAs somewhere around 3.5 to 4 again, which isn't a bad ERA, but considering these two guys and where people expect them to be, to have an ERA at 4.46 for Aaron Nola, that's definitely a down year. And then even last year, Zach Wheeler having an ERA at 3.61, that was essentially a down year. Even though the ERA is still good, it obviously wasn't the 2.82 he had back in 2022 when he was dominant. I do like Trey Turner a lot. He did start the year very cold last season before getting things going in the second half. I expect and I see a big bounce back year from him. I think he hits over 300 with 20 home runs in 30 stolen bases, which he did last season. He had the 20 home runs in the 30 stolen bases last season. The issue last year, though, was just consistency. I expect a better year from him at the plate, batting average-wise. I do think the Phillies are going to take a step back, though, which I know it's probably a hot take, and I thought last year they'd take a step back, and then obviously they had a very good season. I do think this is the year, just like the Rays, I expected both those teams to take a step back last season. Neither one of them did it, but I do think this is the season that the Phillies do take a step back. In fourth place in the NL East, I have the Washington Nationals at 76 and 86. I'm a big fan of C.J. Abrams, still only 23 years old with 241 Major League games under his belt. He had 18 home runs last year with a 64 RBI total and a 245 batting average. I think he's going to have an all-star season. I'm expecting somewhere around 25 home runs, a 275 batting average, and an 875 OPS. Would be a very good season for him. Expecting him to at least take a big step up this season, even if it's not those numbers. I do expect his batting average to be better this season. Mackenzie Gore is very young as well in their pitching rotation. A 4.42 ERA last season in 27 starts with 10 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched. I think he's going to have an under 4 ERA this year. I think he's going to be around 3.9 with 11 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched. And then for his win-loss record, I think he's going to be somewhere around 11-9, 11 wins and 9 losses. They did show some signs of promise, though, last season. The Nationals did show that they had some promise, obviously with the young pieces they got in the Juan Soto trade. I think they carry some of that momentum over this season. They did show signs of promise last year. I think that continues this season. Dylan Cruz, James Wood, Robert Hassel, 3 very good and highly touted prospects. Haven't made it up to the majors yet. I expect them all to make it up at some point this season. I think Wood's going to make noise right away. I think he could be the next Aaron Judge. He's a guy to keep your eye on. Whenever he's called up, he's going to make noise, and a lot of people are going to be talking about him. And dead last in the NL East, I have the Miami Marlins at 70-92. They did lose Jorge Soler in the offseason, which is a major loss for power in their lineup. They made the playoffs last season, but I do have them falling off this year and regressing. Luis Arraez was on another level last year, still the best hitter in their lineup for sure, and probably still one of the best contact hitters in baseball. It's really hard to get that guy out. It was ridiculous. He was almost at a 400 average for the first 2 or 3 months of last season. I do like Jazz Chisholm a lot, but I do think the injuries have worried me. And also, I love his swagger, but I wasn't really too big of a fan of him calling out his former teammates. He needs to be more locked in and probably be a little bit better in the clubhouse. 19 home runs in 97 games last season. I expect him to have probably around 25 home runs if he were to play around 120 games a season. A big issue for him, though, has been being healthy. He hasn't really been able to stay on the field. And even in the games he's played in 3 seasons, he's always had a batting average around 250. They need that to be better. I need it to be around maybe 275. I think he's a better hitter than that. But obviously we see the talent with Jazz. We see the swag. I want to see him take a big step up this season. And then they also have a guy to keep your eye on in Max Meyer, a 25-year-old from a 3rd overall pick in the draft, a 3.45 ERA and 35 starts in the minor leagues. He's a guy that I think is going to break out this season in the rotation at some point. Now to move on to the NL Central, we have the Chicago Cubs at number 1 in the NL Central going 87-75. This is a team that's not getting the respect they deserve, in my opinion. Getting Cody Bellinger back in their lineup was huge. And then you also add a guy in Michael Busch after a trade in the offseason with the LA Dodgers. I think he's going to be a star. Watch out for him to be Rookie of the Year. The issue for him in LA was just that the Dodgers were so deep, really didn't have a place for him, so it made sense for him to go to Chicago and get at-bats. I think he's going to be a great player right away for them. And then Justin Steele is a Cy Young candidate for a reason. And then you also add Shota Imanaga, who's definitely a boost to the rotation that just lost Marcus Stroman. I think the Cubs win the division. In second place in the division, I have the Cincinnati Reds at 84-78. Matt McClain's shoulder surgery is definitely a worry to me. He's probably going to miss, if not all of the season, most of this upcoming season. They're going to need their pitching to step up. And they're banking on guys like Frankie Montas to heavily bounce back. Pitching is a worry here for me because I think Jamie Candelario, Jonathan India, Spencer Steer, I think those guys are going to be able to score runs. They do need more consistency from Ellie De La Cruz, though. He did start off last year very hot, which made him be an overrated player right away. People thought he was the face of the league right away last season, which who knows, maybe he could be. I don't really think he's going to be it, at least right now. But he definitely has great talent. 325 batting average in his first 30 games last season. All of those coming in the first half, with an 887 OPS and 16 stolen bases in the first half last season. All of that in 30 games. In the second half, he hit just 191 with a 627 OPS and 19 stolen bases in 68 games. He really needs to get back to those numbers that he had in the first half of last season. And hopefully he does. The Cincinnati Reds are probably banking on it. And then Hunter Green is an absolute flamethrower, can throw 103 miles an hour and can definitely rack up strikeouts. But control has been an issue for him. A 4.82 ERA last season, 4-7 record with 12.2 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched, which is great. But a 1.42 whip. He needs to be better with accuracy. I do think he steps it up this season. I think he has right around a 4, maybe sub-4 ERA. Let's say a 3.85 ERA, a 1.15 whip, and 12.5 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched. I think he emerges as the ace there in the rotation. Then I have the Pittsburgh Pirates in 3rd place in the division with an 81-81 record. This is a hot take, but I think O'Neal Cruz is going to get into the 30-30 club this season. His injury last year was definitely a major loss to their lineup right away early in the season. He missed most of last year. But with him being back and healthy, I think he's going to put up big numbers for them. And I think he's going to be an MVP candidate as well. Brian Reynolds got his payday from Pittsburgh last season. He's had 24 home runs or more in each of the last 3 seasons. But he only had 262 and 263 for batting average each of the last 2 years, with his OPS dropping from 912 to 807 to 790 over the last 3 seasons. Those numbers are declining a little, but after getting his payday, I'm really hoping he doesn't get complacent like we've seen guys after they cash in. Let's say like Anthony Rendon. I'm hoping he figures a way to get back to those numbers he had a couple years ago when he had a 912 OPS. The Pirates started last season very hot, just like the Utah Jazz, not this season, but last season. The Utah Jazz started out the 2022-2023 season very, very hot and then fell off. And I made this comparison at some point in the podcast last year when the Pittsburgh Pirates started off the year very hot in April, and people were saying, wow, the Pirates, are they going to surprise this year? I said they were like the Utah Jazz because the Jazz started off last season very hot and then declined as the year went on. They exceeded expectations right away and then really just went back and regressed to the mean. I do think the Pirates are going to be better this season. I don't expect them to be a playoff team, but I think they're going to be right around that. Henry Davis struggled as a rookie last season, but I think he's going to have a better year this year. And they're also expecting big numbers from Mitch Keller, who had a 4.2 ERA last season. And he also had a 3.8 FIP last season, which FIP is FIP. It's a fielding independent pitching stat, which basically looks at a pitcher's numbers with his defense not being factored in. So it's on plays like hit batters, walks, home runs, strikeouts, fly ball percentage, ground ball percentage. All those things are factored in, but it doesn't factor in what his defense did for him. So it's factoring in just basically plays where the pitcher gave up a walk, a strikeout, gave up a home run. So the defense isn't being involved in this stat. He had a 3.8 fielding independent pitching number last season, which shows that he was a little bit better than his ERA showed last season. In fourth place in the NL Central, I had the St. Louis Cardinals at 80-82. They had a really disappointing season last year. After a great 2022 season, they were very competitive 2 years ago. They had a really disappointing and a down year last year. Will they bounce back? I think they're going to have a better record, but I don't really see them making the playoffs. Pitching is a major question mark for this team. They don't really have an ace. They're banking on Lance Lynn to pitch like he did in his first few starts with the Dodgers last year. Miles Mikolas is their opening day starter. 4.78 ERA last season at 35 starts. He's a good innings eater, but I don't really think he's an ace unless he pitches like he did in 2022, where he had a 3.29 ERA and was an all-star. I don't really see him going back to those numbers, but I guess you never know at the end of the day. Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, a stud talents, still very good hitters, but they really can't carry a team that doesn't really have the pitching. Nolan Gorman is a good batter as well. 27 home runs, 805 OPS last season in 119 games. If he could stay healthy and play around 140 games, I think he could hit 35 home runs. Definitely a top player in power in the NL. He's a guy to watch out for to hit a good amount of home runs. And then Mason Wynn, only 22 years old. I expect him to develop this season, but he did struggle in 37 games last year, hitting somewhere in the 100s. He needs to be better this year for the St. Louis lineup. And then in fifth place in the NL Central, I have the Milwaukee Brewers at 68-94. They were a playoff team last year, just like the Miami Marlins, but I expect them to take a step back. It's really tough to lose Corbin Burns in a trade. I know DL Hall was a top prospect for Baltimore. It was a good return for Corbin Burns, and he probably will be the number 2 there in Milwaukee. But with Brandon Woodruff probably already out for this season and Corbin Burns being gone, I think that's going to be tough for that pitching staff to overcome. I do like Willie Adames a lot. I do think they're going to trade him at some point. Would love to see him playing second base for the Red Sox. I think Bryce Terang is going to develop more this season. And obviously former BC Eagle, Sal Frelick is probably their leadoff hitter. He had a good season last year as a rookie. And I do like the Rhys Hoskins addition, but I think he's probably going to be something they trade at the deadline. I have them at 5th place in the division. And now for the last division, I have the NL West. I have the Dodgers in first place at 103-59, 103 wins, 59 losses. I expect big things from Freddie Freeman. He's going to be hitting behind Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani. I have Freeman right in the MVP race yet again. He's been top 4 in the NL MVP race each of the last 2 years. And now we have Shohei Ohtani in front of him to get on base and drive up his RBI total. He led major leagues in doubles last year. Freeman's led the major leagues in doubles each of the last 2 years. Since being a Dodger, he's had 50 home runs, 202 RBIs, a 328 batting average, and a 948 OPS. He's a guy that's obviously going to be an MVP candidate every single year, especially considering how dangerous that lineup is. His RBI total is going to be high this season. And this is a lineup that added Shohei Ohtani, Teoscar Hernandez, and they'll also have Gavin Lux back and healthy, which would be huge for their infield. I expect big things from James Outman. I think he's going to break out even more this season and hit, let's say, 30 home runs. He had 23 last season. I expect 30 home runs from him this season, and let's say a 270, 275 batting average. He started off his rookie season last year very hot and then really tailed off towards the end. I expect him to get back to those numbers he had in the first half of last season. The Dodgers are hoping to have Clayton Kershaw and Dustin May back around the All-Star break, maybe slightly after, which would be good to have back in the rotation. And then Walker Buehler should be back within the first few months. He's progressing back from Tommy John surgery. Likely no Tony Gonsolin this season, so they do still have pitching injuries, but they will have some guys coming back. Dustin May, Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, 3 very good pitches. But even with those injuries, the Dodgers went out and added a lot of insurance policies. Tyler Glasnow, James Paxton, Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They added in the offseason for a reason. And this was a rotation that already had 2 young, promising arms last season, Bobby Miller and Emmett Sheehan. I think those 2 guys are going to be better this year as well. And then Gavin Stone will be a rookie this season. He had a 3-1 record with a 3.21 ERA in spring training. Last year, he really struggled, a 1-1 record with a 9 ERA in some limited innings for the Dodgers. I think he's going to be a great player for them. I think he's a guy to watch out for as a Rookie of the Year candidate in the NL. With all of the Dodgers' injuries, he's going to get an opportunity. And I was really a big fan of the Dodgers giving Will Smith that 10-year, $140 million extension. That is an absolute steal for the Dodgers, especially considering catching is a really hard position to find a young stud like him. And obviously, he's their cleanup hitter as well. A big part of the lineup, only giving him $140 million over 10 years. That is a great deal for the Dodgers. And like I've noted before, this team is not afraid of going out and making a big move. I wouldn't be surprised if they add to this rotation even more and get, let's say, Shane Bieber at some point. This team is not afraid of making a big move, whether it's in free agency or a big trade. And that's what I love most about this team. They're dedicated to winning from the ground up. They develop their talent. They draft very well. And obviously dedicated to winning at the major league level. Each and every year they're looking to load up. And that's why I'm a big fan of the Dodgers. In second place in this division, I have the Arizona Diamondbacks at 87-75. They added Eduardo Rodriguez to the rotation. He was 13-9 last year with a 3.3 ERA and 26 starts last year for the Detroit Tigers. He's going to begin the season on the IL, but he'll be back at some point. This is a rotation that already has Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, and they just added Jordan Montgomery, which makes it a very dangerous 1-2-3 punch. Montgomery didn't get the money he wanted, just 1 year, $25 million, but that's a very good add for an already good rotation that got hot at the right time in the playoffs last season, and obviously made it all the way to the World Series. And now they're adding Jordan Montgomery, who played against him in the World Series. 2.79 ERA and 11 regular season starts last year for Texas. 2.9 ERA and 5 starts in the postseason for the Rangers last year. He was a major reason they won the World Series. Their pitching staff is going to be a strong suit there in Arizona. Their offense did catch fire at the right time in the playoffs last season, which I don't know if they're going to be as good as they were in the playoffs last year, but Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte, Christian Walker, a very strong 1-2-3 in that lineup. They're expected to have another good season for a reason. I think Jordan Montgomery going there definitely gave them the nod for me for them to make the playoffs. Without Jordan Montgomery, I probably had them slightly missing the playoffs, and the same thing goes with the Giants adding Blake Snell. With both of those additions, now I have those 2 teams making the playoffs. In San Francisco, I have them at 3rd place in the division with an 86-76 record. Jorge Soler, Matt Chapman with great additions to their lineup. They needed to find a way to add to their offense. Putting runs on the board is a major issue for them last season, and also defensively, they had the most errors in the major leagues last year. But adding Blake Snell as well to their pitching rotation is definitely huge. And I expected San Francisco to be a team that would be very aggressive in the offseason. That was my number 1 team to be the most aggressive in the offseason was the San Francisco Giants. And now we obviously see that. Adding Chapman, adding Soler, adding Blake Snell. Blake Snell was a Cy Young winner last year in the NL. And now with Logan Webb, that's a great 1-2 starting pitching duo. And even without Snell, they had a good team. I just thought they would probably just miss the playoffs. I probably would have the Phillies making it over them in that case, or maybe the Mets. But after getting Blake Snell, I'm a really big fan of what this team did in the offseason. And where they are in the draft, they have the 13th overall pick. They're in a prime position to build this team even more for years to come. Watch out for them to go get a guy like Mike Soroka in the draft. That would be a great addition for them with the 13th overall pick. They're looking to add even more hitting, and Mike Soroka would be a great pick for them in the middle of the first round. But Logan Webb, Blake Snell, a great 1-2 starting pitching duo. And then they also added another hitter. They added Korean baseball player Jung-Hoo Lee, who played in 7 seasons in the Korean baseball organization with a .340 batting average. That's a great addition to their lineup. They added offense. They needed help to put runs on the board. Soler, Chapman, and Lee are 3 great additions. And then you also had Blake Snell, a potential ace next to Logan Webb. I'm a big fan of what the Giants did in the offseason. In 4th place in the NL West, I have the San Diego Padres at 81-81. They lost a lot of talent this offseason, trading Juan Soto, losing Blake Snell in free agency, losing Josh Hader in free agency as well. They did add Dylan Cease and Michael King to the rotation, but they also lost Seth Lugo, Michael Walker. It's hard to really expect this team to put up numbers. I expected more of them last season, and they didn't really do it. They were really underwhelming last season, and it's really hard to expect big numbers out of Yu Darvish at this point of his career. Dylan Cease is a good addition. He's got great stuff. He's going to rack up strikeouts, but I do think he's a little bit overrated. We'll see how Xander Bogaerts, Manny Machado, and Fernando Tatis perform, but I do think this team misses the playoffs by a few games. A guy to watch out for, though, is former first-round pick Jackson Merrill, an outfielder for the Padres. top 20 prospect in the major leagues, hit .295 in the minor leagues with an .802 OPS in 3 seasons in the minors. The Padres are very, very high on this kid. We'll see what he does for them this season. In dead last in the NL West, I have the Colorado Rockies at 64-98. They're still in the middle of a rebuild. They don't really have enough pitching right now to compete in a very tough division. This may be the best division of baseball, so the Rockies are really just picking a bad time to be in a rebuild considering how good the teams are around them. Nolan Jones is probably their best player. Last season had 20 home runs, .297 batting average with a .931 OPS. What can we expect from Kris Bryant this season? He's only played in 122 games in 2 seasons in Colorado, got a heavy payday, and has really struggled to stay healthy. And even when he's been healthy, he hasn't been very good. 2 years ago, he was good. Last year, he really struggled. In just 2 seasons, he's played 122 games, just 15 home runs, a .259 batting average, and a .740 OPS. If you look at his numbers from 2021, he had 25 home runs, 73 runs batted in, a .265 batting average, and an .835 OPS. He hasn't really been close to that at all in Colorado. If he plays over 100 games, that would probably be a win for the Rockies. I would love to see a Cody Bellinger type of bounce-back year for Kris Bryant. You just cannot expect him to stay healthy. Ezekiel Tovar is a guy to watch out for in their lineup, a shortstop who is a young player they just gave a big extension to, 7 years, $63.5 million. Good to see the Rockies locking up some of their future, and I like Bud Black a lot, their manager, but I do think this is a building year for them. Probably another year where they finish 5th in the NL West, but if they have a season where they win, let's say, 70 games, that would probably be a win for them, and would definitely be an improvement considering where people are expecting them to finish in the division. 70 wins would probably be exceeding most people's expectations. I do expect them to be a little bit better this season than they were last season. So now for my playoff predictions. In the American League, my number 1 seed, the Baltimore Orioles, number 2 seed, Houston Astros, number 3 seed, Detroit Tigers, and then my wildcard teams. The Mariners, the Red Sox, the Rangers. I have the Rangers getting the last wildcard spot over the Yankees with the tiebreaker. I know the Red Sox are a hot take to make the playoffs. Probably very ambitious of me, but I'm going to be a little bit biased having them make the playoffs. I do think they're going to exceed some expectations, though, and surprise people this season. I don't think runs are going to be the problem for the Red Sox. I expect them to score runs. I think pitching is ultimately the biggest question for this team. Chris Martin, Kenley Jansen, 2 good pitchers in the bullpen. I think the issue for them, though, is their starting pitching. We'll see how they do this season. I do think Cutter Crawford is going to emerge and be a very good pitcher for them in the rotation. As for the wild card, these are my predictions. I have the Rangers over the Tigers in 2 games, and I have the Mariners over the Red Sox in 3 games. The wild card now is a 3-game series. So I have the Rangers over the Tigers in 2 games, the Mariners over the Red Sox in 3 games. The Mariners have better starting pitching at the end of the day. Like I mentioned, Logan Gilbert and obviously George Kirby and Luis Castillo. I expect them to beat the Red Sox in my predictions in a 3-game series. And then I have the ALDS being the Orioles over the Mariners in 4 games, the Rangers over the Astros in 5 games. The Rangers may struggle to make the playoffs. They might be right on the border yet again, like they were last year. But if they can get Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom back healthy, that would be huge for their rotation. I expect them to make a run in October yet again. And then in the ALCS, I have the Orioles over the Rangers in 6 games. As for the NL, my number 1 seed, Atlanta Braves, number 2 seed, Dodgers, number 3 seed, Cubs. And then my wildcard teams are the Arizona Diamondbacks, San Francisco Giants, and the Cincinnati Reds. I have the Reds just barely making it over the Mets. I have the Mets at 84 wins, just like I do with the Reds, but I have the Reds getting a tiebreaker over the Mets, just like I have the Rangers getting the tiebreaker over the Yankees. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Mets make the playoffs, though. I know a lot of people don't have high expectations for them this season, but I think they could surprise some people this season. I think they're going to finish 2nd in the NL East. Obviously a very tough division, though, right now. So just to break down the seedings again, Braves at 1, Dodgers at 2, Cubs at 3, Diamondbacks at 4, Giants at 5, and the Reds at 6. And my wild card, I have the Cubs over the Reds in 2 games, and I have the Giants over the Diamondbacks in 3 games. The NLDS, I have the Dodgers over the Cubs in 4 games. I have the Braves over the Giants in 5 games. And then in the NLCS, I have the Dodgers over the Braves in 7 games. That would be great and a very fun series to watch. 2 juggernauts in the NL going at it. Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies, Max Fried, Chris Sale, Spencer Strider. I mean, that would be a very, very fun series to watch. And then on the Dodgers side, you have Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Clayton Kershaw, Freddie Freeman. The list just goes on and on. This would be a great and fun series to watch. I would have the Dodgers over the Braves in 7. And then in the World Series, the way things currently stand, my season prediction on opening day, the World Series prediction for me, I have the Dodgers over the Orioles in 6 games. With my MVP in the World Series going to a crazy pick here. It's going to be a wild card pick to most people, but I'm going to go James Outman. I was going to say Freddie Freeman, but I want to mix it up for fun. I have James Outman as my World Series MVP. And now for my award predictions in the MLB. The AL MVP, I was going to go Mike Trout. I think he has a bounce-back season. But I'm going to switch my pick. I'm going to go with an under-the-radar guy. I'm going to go with Royce Lewis. Former top pick, just 24 years old. He's only played in 70 games over the last 2 seasons. Hit 15 home runs last year. But just like Byron Buxton, if he could stay healthy, he can be one of the best players in the major leagues. I think if he stays healthy this season, I know this is a long shot and a dark horse pick, I'm going to go with Royce Lewis as my MVP in the AL. I think he can hit 310 with 35 home runs, 90 runs batted in, and a 920 OPS. That's probably very high expectations, especially considering that probably banks on him staying healthy. But I do think he has the talent to be one of the best players in the AL. My MVP runner-up in the AL, besides Mike Trout, I'm going to go Juan Soto. I think Juan Soto's going to have a big year. Last year was good for the Padres, 35 home runs, 109 runs batted in, 132 walks, which led the major leagues, also a 930 OPS. With a short right field at Yankee Stadium, I expect him to have probably 40 home runs this season, and also having Aaron Judge with him in the lineup, I expect Soto to have a very good season. And then for an under-the-radar dark horse pick, I'm going to go with Tristan Casas, which I'm just doing dark horse picks here just to pick a long shot that could potentially have a chance to be in the conversation. I think Tristan Casas could potentially be in the conversation this season. NL MVP, I got Mookie Betts, 307 batting average last season, 39 home runs, 107 runs batted in, a 987 OPS. Went toe for toe with Ronald Acuna Jr. last season for the MVP race. Was very much there right until the end. I was between Freeman and Mookie Betts for MVP here, but I ended up going with Mookie Betts. I'm going to go with Mookie since I think last year he had a very good season, was right there with Ronald Acuna Jr. I expect him to have a very good year this year as well. And then my MVP runner-up, I'm going to go Austin Riley. 30 home runs in each of the last 3 seasons. Last year had 37 home runs, 94 runs batted in, a 281 batting average with an 861 OPS. He's been top 7 in MVP each of the last 3 seasons. I think he takes a step towards Matt Olson's numbers from last year and hits around 40-plus home runs. He is my MVP runner-up in the NL. My under-the-radar dark horse for the NL, same thing as last year. I'm going to go Willy Adames. I think he's going to get traded at some point from Milwaukee. I'm just picking an under-the-radar guy, dark horse pick just for fun. I think Willy Adames could be a guy to keep your eye on. And then just one more guy I want to mention as a runner-up. Health is a worry for me with this guy, but O'Neal Cruz. If O'Neal Cruz can stay healthy, I think he can be an MVP candidate in the NL. I expect Pittsburgh to be better this season. I think Cruz is going to be a big part of that. He looks very good in spring training. 7 home runs, 14 runs batted in, a 261 batting average. I think he's a candidate for a 30-30 season. If he stays healthy, I think he'll be in the MVP race in the NL. For my Cy Young winner, I'm going to go with Corbin Burns of the Baltimore Orioles. Right when the Orioles traded for him, I said right away in my head, I think he's going to be the Cy Young winner this season. In 2021, he won the Cy Young in the NL, 11-5 record, 2.43 ERA, with 234 strikeouts and 167 innings pitched. Last year, a 10-8 record, 3.39 ERA, with the 127 ERA plus. Baltimore needed an ace, and they finally got one. This is going to be huge for them when October rolls around. I expect them to take a step up this season. I think Baltimore was very good last year. I expect them to take another step up and make a deeper run in the AL. I think Corbin Burns is going to be a big reason they make a deep run in October. As for my runner-up in the AL, I'm going to go Cole Reagans of the Kansas City Royals. He was honestly going to be my pick to win the Cy Young, but all morning I've just been flip-flopping between Burns and Reagans. I'm going to go with Burns as the winner, and then I'll go Reagans as the runner-up. Reagans was traded from Texas to Kansas City in the trade for Aroldis Chapman, which obviously ended up working out for the Texas Rangers. They went out and won a World Series, and that was actually the second time that Aroldis Chapman was traded at the deadline, where a team ended up winning the World Series. The Chicago Cubs did it back in 2016, and then obviously this past year with the Texas Rangers. But it ended up working out for Kansas City as well. In his starts last year, Reagans, after being traded from Texas to Kansas City, he went 5-2 in 12 starts with a 2.64 ERA, a 168 ERA plus, which is very good, a 1.074 whip, 11.2 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched, and a 2.49 FIP, which is elite. And for reference, Garrett Cole last year was the Cy Young winner in the AL, a 165 ERA plus, which Reagans in the 12 starts he had last year, small sample size, but 12 starts last year for Kansas City, a 168 ERA plus. So that's better than Garrett Cole's 165 ERA plus. And Cole also had a 3.16 FIP last year in a Cy Young season. Last year in his 12 starts in Kansas City, Reagans had a 2.49 FIP. So I think he's a guy to watch out for as a runner-up or a candidate to win it all for the Cy Young in the AL. A long shot under the radar guy, I'm going to go Ryan Pepiot of the Tampa Bay Rays. He's just 26 years old, was a highly touted prospect for the Dodgers at one point. In 2 seasons, he's made 10 starts in 17 games, a 2.76 ERA, a 1.085 whip with a 153 ERA plus. If you look at the 8 games, though, he played in last season, a 2.14 ERA, and a 2.04 ERA plus. I think this kid could be a guy to watch out for years to come to be an AL Cy Young candidate. The Rays always find ways to find young pitchers and turn them into the player that they know they can be. They always find a way to fix a pitcher's delivery or accuracy or speed or their breaking ball, and they always get the best out of everyone. So I think Ryan Pepiot was a guy to watch out for as a long shot, under the radar, dark horse pick for AL Cy Young. And then for the NL, I got Max Fried winning it all. In just 14 starts last year, he was 8-1 with a 2.55 ERA and a 1.74 ERA plus. In his last 4 seasons, 43-15 and 83 starts, with 162 as his ERA plus and a 1.067 whip. He has been dominant. The issue has just been being healthy. And if he can stay healthy, I think he'll be the best pitcher in the Braves rotation and also win the NL Cy Young. My runner-up, I'm going to go Tyler Glasnow. At one point, he was my pick to win it all for the Cy Young in the NL, but at the end of the day, the issue with him has been being healthy, and that's why I ended up going with him as a runner-up and Fried as a winner. I know Fried has had his injuries, but I think Glasnow is just a little bit more injury-prone. He really struggled in his first start with walks, but I really do like him a lot. It's only one start at the end of the day. He was 1-0 in 3 starts in spring training with a .9 ERA, with a .7 whip. I think he's going to be a very good pitcher for the Dodgers. It's just a question of whether or not he can stay healthy. A dark horse for the NL Cy Young is another Dodger, Bobby Miller. He had an 11-4 record last season with a 3.76 ERA and a 1.1 whip. Also add in an 8.9 strikeout per 9 innings pitched. Wasn't really crazy with strikeouts last season, but he needs to get that number up a little bit if he were to be in the conversation for a Cy Young. I'm very high on him. I don't really know if this year is going to be the Cy Young chance for him, but I do think in the next couple of years, he can definitely contend for that if he continues to grow and develop. And then another guy to watch out for is a dark horse, Braxton Garrett. A guy in the Miami Marlins that I'm high on, a 9-7 record last season with a 3.66 ERA, a 1.146 whip, and a 1.22 ERA plus. He's a guy to keep your eye on as an under-the-radar guy to potentially win the NL Cy Young. Next up is Rookie of the Year. In the AL, I'm going to go Jackson Holliday. I know he's starting out the year in AAA for the Orioles. I do think he's going to get called up at some point within the next month, and when he does, I think he's going to tear it up right away. As a runner-up, I'm going to go Nolan Schanuel of the Angels. He was up with the Angels last season, showed some promise and showed some flashes. I think he's going to have a good season for the Angels in their lineup. And then a dark horse is Heston Kjerstad of the Baltimore Orioles. 10 home runs, a .298 batting average in AAA last season. If he does get the chance to get more at-bats this season in the major leagues, I know he did struggle in the few at-bats he got last year, I think he could be a good addition to that lineup. But the problem with Baltimore is they're just so deep, so many young and talented prospects, that at the end of the day, Kjerstad may not even get that many at-bats this season, and maybe at some point, they could potentially shop some of their prospects to go out and get a big piece of the deadline. I expect the Orioles to be really, really aggressive at the deadline this season. In the NL, my Rookie of the Year is Michael Busch of the Chicago Cubs. My runner-up, I'm going to go Gavin Stone of the Dodgers. Michael Busch just really didn't have a place in LA considering how many guys they had in their infield, so it made sense for them to trade him. And he's still a rookie this season. He did struggle in limited at-bats last season for the Dodgers. Just 2 home runs, a 167 batting average in 27 games played. But the talent is there. I do think he's going to have a good year this year with just more consistent at-bats. It's really hard to be a good hitter at the plate when you're getting limited and scattered at-bats. I do expect him to take a step up. And then for runner-up, I have Gavin Stone of the Dodgers. Looked very good in spring training. I know he didn't really do too much last year for the Dodgers in the majors, but I do think he's going to have a good year. And then a dark horse to watch out for is James Wood. If Washington does call him up at some point, he's going to catch eyes immediately. For reliever of the year in the AL, I have Josh Hader. I think he's going to have a great year for Houston. And then in the NL, I have a big bounce back here from Edwin Diaz of the Mets. I think he's going to have a great year. Just losing him before last season was really tough for the Mets. I expect them to win more close games this season. That's why I have them at second in the NL East. As for manager of the year in the AL, I have AJ Hinch. If Detroit wins the division and they make it back to the playoffs for the first time since 2014, the last time they made the playoffs, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander were still in their starting rotation. If they make the playoffs this season, I think AJ Hinch ends up being the manager of the year in the AL. As for the NL, I'm very high on the Reds this year. I think they'll be right on the border of making the playoffs or not, but that would definitely be progress considering where they were the last few seasons. Obviously, last year was a step up. I think they take another step up this season. I know they're right on the border of the playoffs or not. I have them just making it on a tiebreaker over the Mets. If the Reds make it in, though, that would be the first time making the playoffs since 2020, and that was a shortened season. But before that, the last time making the playoffs was 2013. So if they make it to the playoffs this year, David Bell would probably be a good guy to look at for manager of the year. As a comeback player of the year, in the AL, I have Trevor Story. I think he takes a big step up this year for the Red Sox. I think he looks like the Trevor Story of old back in his Colorado Rockies days. And if the Red Sox want to make the playoffs or be anywhere close to that in September, they need Trevor Story to get back to those numbers he had in Colorado. And if you look at the Red Sox, they had 51 wins against teams over 500 last year. The third most wins in the game of baseball last season against teams 500 or better. And I know they played a lot of divisional games last year, And the division was very good. Everyone was over 500 except for the Red Sox. So that obviously helps their total, being 51 wins against teams 500 or better. But the Red Sox could take a step up this year. If Trevor Story could find a way to be more consistent and healthy, Tristan Casas continues to rise. And then obviously guys like Tanner Houck and Cutter Crawford, if those guys can emerge in the rotation, the Red Sox can be dangerous. And that's why Trevor Story is my comeback player of the year. Because if the Red Sox want to be anywhere successful this year, they need Trevor Story to bounce back. As for the NL comeback player of the year, I think Luis Severino. I think he has a big bounce back year for the Mets. For the breakout player of the year in the AL, I'm going to go Royce Lewis of the Minnesota Twins. I think he has a very good year if he stays healthy. And then in the NL, I'm going to go CJ Abrams of the Washington Nationals. Great speed, 47 stolen bases last year. I think he has an all-star season this year. It really proves people wrong. People are really critical of him after he really struggled in the majors with the Padres. But I think this kid can show promise this year. I think he's going to develop even more, and he's still so young. For my MLB leaders, I'm going to go with the batting average leader being Mookie Betts. My RBI leader, I'm going to go Austin Riley. I was going to go Freddie Freeman, but I'm going to go with Freddie Freeman as the runner-up. The hits leader, I'm going to go Corey Seager. Doubles leader, I'm going to go Mookie Betts, which Freddie Freeman's always great for doubles, but I'm going to go Mookie Betts. In the AL, though, watch out for Jarren Duran. He shows a lot of speed and turns a lot of singles into doubles. I know some people are expecting him to take a step back this season. I think Jarren Duran's going to be locked in this year. I'm a big fan of him and always rooting for him to do big things. As for my triples leader in baseball, I'm going to go with Gunnar Henderson of the Orioles. I think he takes another step up this season as well. The Orioles just have so many young, talented players. Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Jackson Holiday will be up at some point. There's just so many guys in that lineup, and I'm going to go with Gunnar Henderson with all the speed he has. He had 7 triples last season, so I'm going to predict him to be the triples leader in baseball. And I do expect a guy like Cedric Mullins to bounce back, which this really doesn't have too much to do with triples, but Mullins does have a lot of speed. I do think he has a bounce-back year, and that Orioles lineup is just very dangerous. Anthony Santander, very good power hitter. Ryan Mountcastle had very hot stretches last year. This team's going to be dangerous. As for my home run king, I'm going to go Luis Robert. I think he has enough power to win it. It's just a question of whether or not he can stay healthy. 38 home runs last year in 145 games. If he could play, let's say, 150 games again, and in a lineup that's probably not going to really be doing too much, he can just swing for the fences whenever he wants, I think he could hit around 45 home runs. As for my stolen base leader, I'm going to go Jarren Duran in the AL and then CJ Abrams in the NL, with my wins leader being Max Fried. I think he's going to have a dominant year for the Braves. My ERA leader in baseball, I'm going to go Corbin Burns. My saves leader, I'm going to go Josh Hader. And then my strikeout leader, I'm going to go Cole Reagans. And then for a breakout pitcher, I'm going to go Cutter Crawford. I think Cutter Crawford is going to have a great year for the Red Sox. I expect him to be somewhere around all-star potential. I think he's going to have a great year for that Red Sox rotation. And I may be wrong about some of these things. Some of these things just might be wishful thinking. Sometimes you just have a feeling, though, that guys are going to really break out this season, like I do with Cutter Crawford. I may be wrong about some of these things, but at the end of the day, that's what sports are all about. There's so many things that are just, unknown before a season begins. So I'm excited to see how this season unfolds. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one. Enjoy opening day, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Best of luck to all your teams. Have a good one.